Today, we are talking about the OG, overstuffed, never-ending superhero dynasty. But first, a word from our sponsor. I know you. You're like me. You love binge-watching movies and TV shows. Who doesn't? Listen, if COVID has taught us one thing, it's that we are all capable of watching many hours of TVs and movies. But you may find the selection a bit limiting in your country. I know that I do, which is why I love using ExpressVPN. With ExpressVPN, I can log on to, let's say, Netflix UK and watch one of my favorite TV shows, Humans. And it's so easy to use, seriously. Just open ExpressVPN, choose your country, turn on, and bam, baby, you're there. Check out the link in my description box below to find out how you can get 3 months free. That's right, free of ExpressVPN. Just go to expressvpn.com/Kyle Reaume. That's expressvpn.com/Kyle Reaume, REAUME, to find out how you can get 3 months free. Shout out to this comment on my video about the mixed legacy of the Matrix franchise. I did not know about the use of miniatures in the Matrix 3, but it makes sense because it looks so damn good. Thank you so much. I knew I wasn't the only one who appreciated it. Today we are talking about the X-Men franchise. The X-Men franchise is really the OG superhero franchise because it's the one that really started it all. The first X-Men film actually came out before the first Spider-Man film, and both of those came out before any of the official MCU films. So with X-Men, something really different was happening here, especially in the way that the first film was a risk, and they had no idea what they were going to do with this franchise. There were very vague plans. There was a lot of canceled plans. There's a lot of films that did happen that shouldn't have, and there's a lot of films that didn't happen that would have been wonderful if they had. But we're really just going to start by focusing on the 13 that do exist. I mean, this is the definition of a mixed legacy, not only because some of them are stellar and honestly personal favorites of mine, and some of them are so bad that after watching them for this video, I have vowed to never watch them again. No matter who you are, you've probably seen, whether you realize it or not, at least like 5 of the X-Men films. They have been around for so long. You know, they have literally been making constant non-stop X-Men movies for 21 years, and they're only ramping up. The New Mutants, which came out last year, effectively ended the run of 20th Century Fox reign over the X-Men franchise and their last remaining Marvel property. So, let's talk about the films. Let's talk about these 13 films. Let's talk about the strengths of the franchise. Let's talk about the weaknesses of the franchise. Let's talk about its greatest moments. Let's talk about its worst moments. And let's talk about the future of the franchise, because even though 20th Century Fox may not have their hands on this content anymore, somebody else does. And that somebody is going to make a lot more movies out of this. I know what you're thinking. 13 films is a lot. In doing this video, I did watch and rewatch all 13, and I've got some feelings. So, let's take it from the top. X-Men. Oh, this film brings back so many memories. You know, this is really where it all started. This was pre-Spider-Man, this was pre-Dark Knight, and it was 9 years before Iron Man, which is the first film in the actual Marvel Cinematic Universe. This film was a risk, and it took a long time to get made by 20th Century Fox because people just weren't sure how it would perform. And reactions to it were a little bit mixed. You know, when it came out, people didn't quite know what to expect. They didn't really know what to make of it. But me looking back on it, I still think it's one of the best. I think it's really fun. Because it's the first film, they were still trying to work out a few kinks. So there's like a few things that didn't make it into this film. There's a few things that they did in this film that they changed later on. One being Storm and her accent. So Storm is canonically from Africa. So in this first film, she has a very light but subtle African accent.
Do you hate normal people?
Sometimes. I suppose I'm afraid of them.
This is the last film we will ever see that accent appear. They actually wanted to cast Angela Bassett as Storm at the time, but they couldn't afford her. Some people have been pretty critical of this film. Some people feel like it hasn't really aged well. There's definitely some bits that feel cheesy for sure. And there's some lines that have been very, very debated. Lines that people hate that also happen to be lines that I love. The one line that people love to make fun of with Storm and Toad, when she's blowing him away and he's hanging off the building by his tongue. And then she says,
Do you know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning?
and then she looks up with her eyes and she goes,
The same thing that happens to everything else.
Because this film also had a lower budget, what's really nice and refreshing about this film is for a superhero movie, it also has a lot less graphics and reliance on VFX than the kind of films that we see today. And it works really, really well. There's a couple times they use some full-scale CGI where it really doesn't work, especially with Wolverine doing the claw and then the spin around and then the landing back. I mean, absolutely nothing about that shot makes sense. The physics of it also really don't look good. I can't believe they did it here. I really can't believe they did it again with Black Panther. There's some characters who are also meant to be in this, but they weren't. One is Jubilee, so they actually shot scenes with an actor playing Jubilee, and then they deleted them. Because the first Spider-Man film was also being made at the same time, the productions had a little bit of fun with each other. There's a blooper where you can see in the Ellis Island scenes in X-Men, as they're walking along, one of the stunt doubles playing Spider-Man in the first Tobey Maguire movie actually ran on set and crashed their take.
Wait! I am completely in the wrong movie. I am so sorry.
It was honestly simpler times, better times. Very surprisingly, Roger Ebert gave this film a thumbs down, and I'm a big Roger Ebert fan. I haven't talked about him much on this channel. Kind of sucks that he gave this film a thumbs down. Roger Ebert said that he started out liking this movie while waiting for something really interesting to happen. When nothing did, I still didn't dislike it. I assume the X-Men will further develop their personalities if there is a sequel, and maybe find time to get involved in a story. No doubt fans of the comic will understand subtle allusions and fine points of behavior. Pete Travers of the Rolling Stone said, as Storm, Halle Berry can do neat tricks, but her role is gone with the wind. It sucks that Stewart and McKellen, two superb actors, are underused. Some critics also faulted the film for focusing too much on Logan and not enough on the other characters. I do and I don't agree with that. I would argue, if anything, that it's both Logan and Rogue's story, as they are the two mutants who are being introduced into the actual X-Men. At the beginning, they're both nobodies, they're both loners, they find each other, and then the X-Men find them. I honestly think it's a really great story. The filmmakers made a pretty smart decision to not actually replicate the costumes from the original comic books. Both Stan Lee and Chris Claremont of Marvel agreed with this, with Claremont saying, "You can do that on a drawing, but when you put it on people, it's disturbing." Of course, they need to be self-referential about it, so they have Logan make a joke about it to Cyclops.
You actually go outside in these things? What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
With this film, they also use sclera lenses for their actors. So sclera contact lenses are lenses that go over the entire eye. They tried to go all practical with the contact lenses on the first X-Men film, but that didn't really work out, with the cast finding the lenses uncomfortable and at times dangerous to wear. Rebecca Romaine could only wear her Mystique lenses for 1 hour at a time and had only 10% vision. Tyler Mane kept his Sabretooth lenses in for too long and ended up getting blinded for a day. And Halle Berry wore her opaque white Storm lenses only once, said that she found them unbearable, and insisted that she have CGI for her eyes instead. I actually believe rules about how long scleras can be kept in were made after this film. X-Men was released in the year 2000, and it received an 82% on Rotten Tomatoes, with an 83% audience score. The critic consensus for X-Men states, faithful to the comics and filled with action, X-Men brings a crowded slate of classic Marvel characters to the screen, with a talented ensemble cast and surprisingly sharp narrative focus. X2. X2 is so great. It's even better than the first one. It's such a strong improvement. Honestly, I still think that X2 will live on as one of the best superhero sequels ever. It's like right up there with Spider-Man 2 and Batman Returns and Terminator 2. This time the story's bigger, the budget was bigger, although the budget still did get cut. There was a planned scene in the Danger Room, but when their budget got cut, that scene had to go. However, they still had already made a teaser trailer showing off this CGI danger room. So despite that tease, no danger room in this one. Jubilee was cast in this film. They shot scenes with her, and then they deleted those scenes. Same situation as the first movie. If I recall correctly, I think the filmmakers said part of their struggle was trying to incorporate Jubilee when Rogue was such a similar character, because they were essentially both young runaways with powers that make them hard to physically connect with other people. And I do kind of see the similarity, but it sucks that they filmed scenes with her twice in the first and the second film, and they deleted them both times. There's a scene in this film where Bobby has to confront his parents and tell them that he's a mutant. It's a really good analogy for the coming out process. Ian McKellen actually helped them shape it to look even more like a coming out story. So the questions are pretty funny.
Have you tried not being a mutant?
These films have a lot of good deleted scenes. There's a deleted scene here with Rogue where she helps a couple students escape, and it's a really good moment.
Aren't you coming?
No, I have to find someone first. When you get to the end of the tunnel, head straight through the woods till you get to Grey Malkin Lane. No matter what you do, don't tell them you're mutants.
It's a strong Rogue moment that I just don't understand why they felt they had to take out. Won't be the first or last time they'll do that with Rogue. Storm is back. This time her hair is just a little bit shorter, and she doesn't have an accent anymore.
Well, I gave up on pity a long time ago.
No questions. There is a brief cameo here by Hank McCoy, aka Beast. It's very interesting, but it's in direct conflict with every other depiction of Beast that we see in future films, including the immediate follow-up to this X3, so they clearly didn't have all this stuff planned out. All right, so the time has come for this episode's Once You See It, You Can't Unsee It. This one I noticed probably one of the first times that I ever saw X2, and I see it every time I watch the film. I just see it every time. So at Alkali Lake, when Storm and Nightcrawler are trying to get the kids out of the chamber, she tells Nightcrawler that he has to teleport into the chamber to bring all the kids out. And he does, and it's great, except that he's already there. Alan Cumming, who plays Nightcrawler, is just sort of supposed to appear out of nowhere, right? That's his special power. But when they show this shot before he teleports there, you can actually see him just standing there. What a strange fourth wall breaking moment. Again, I kind of feel the same way that I did about the glasses thing with Matrix 2. I am so surprised for a film that's filled with hundreds, if not thousands of VFX shots that at no point does anybody catch this and think, maybe we should paint this guy out or it'll ruin the whole illusion of him being able to teleport. Have you ever caught this? Let me know in the comments. Sometimes I feel like I'm crazy when I catch these things, but I know that they're real and you can see them too. It's really nice to have a film where Magneto isn't just the full-time villain. You know, he was in the first one, but then in this one, he's actually imprisoned. And yeah, when he gets his opportunity, he snakes in there, but he is actually really not the villain of this one. It's Stryker, and Stryker is good. Funny story, Brian Cox, who actually plays Stryker, was also in a Adam Sandler film named Pixels, which was shot here in Toronto. He played some kind of a military officer, and well, I was an extra on that film, and I spent a couple days standing really close to him the whole time. That story is for another day, though. That whole story of me spending 2 days on an Adam Sandler film is, that's just gonna have to be its own video. I really like the progression of Jean Grey's storyline in this one, and I really like how it ends. I honestly think there's so much sincerity in this film, and when Cyclops and Wolverine are both reeling from Jean Grey's death, they actually embrace each other, and I always thought that was a very strong, very sincere moment in the X-Men franchise that just really goes to show how much heart and how much love went into this film. Even though it got its budget cut during production, they still made what I think is easily one of the standout, just stellar X-Men entries. X2 was released in 2003, where it received an 85% on Rotten Tomatoes, as well as a perfectly matched 85% audience score. The critic consensus states, tightly scripted, solidly acted, and impressively ambitious, X2 X-Men United is bigger and better than its predecessor, and a benchmark for comic sequels in general. And of course, just like any franchise, the second film is usually followed up by the frickin' worst third film. I know that I've said this before and I will say it again. The third film in a franchise is always the worst. This is no exception. X-Men 3, The Last Stand. So much that I could say about this, but I want to keep this whole video under an hour and a half, so. This film is messy. So Brett Ratner directed this movie after Bryan Singer, weirdly enough, left the project to take Brett Ratner's Superman Returns. So they both switched each other's projects. There is a lot of really messy, confusing, and just nonsensical things in Last Stand. So in the beginning of this film, we actually do see the Danger Room, and it's middling. And at the end, Wolverine severs the Sentinel's head, and then the head gets thrown right in front of the screen. And then after the head lands, Wolverine walks out from it. But we saw, like, the head, how? Where the frick was Wolverine? How did he walk out from behind it? Is he a magician now? Mystique gets really shafted in this film. Point of fact, they get rid of her pretty early on. She even sells out Magneto, which is very off character.
Homo sapien.
Mystique said gay rights. Halle Berry also made some kind of a deal with the filmmakers that she would only return to the third X-Men film if her role would be expanded. Halle Berry had really shot to that A-lister status, between these first two films. So for the third one, she really felt like she had been underutilized in X2, and she really wanted a larger role, which is why she is seen as the new leader in the end of this one. And also, I don't know. I don't know if this is why they killed Xavier, but it does give perfect leeway for Storm to become the new leader. Something that never really takes place in the future. Now, this film was originally based off of two different scripts with two different storylines. One of them was all about this cure being introduced that could potentially get rid of someone's mutancy gene. That was going to be its own whole story and its whole script. And the other was a full story dedicated to the Jean Grey Dark Phoenix storyline, which of course was alluded to at the end of X2. Now, it would have been great if they had just done a Dark Phoenix story, and it would have been really good if they had just done a cure story. However, they decided to mix the two, and you just get a real mishmash of a big fat stick of whatever. They really should have focused a lot more time on Jean Grey. Absolutely. For something that's supposed to be about Dark Phoenix and her whole relationship with the rest of the X-Men, she's surprisingly not there a lot. That doesn't mean she doesn't look badass, though. The look that she gets in her eyes when she's ripping the flesh off of Wolverine's face, and she's like... It's a good face. Because they were working with multiple scripts combined here, there was obviously some mismatch over direction. Rogue is again shafted in this film because rather than her have a storyline, she just spends the majority of this film in line waiting to get the cure. It really upsets me because, there's a scene where somebody even blows up the facility where they're giving people the cure, and still we get nothing with Rogue. This would have been an excellent opportunity to show Rogue helping people, just like how she helped those kids in that deleted scene from the second one. And she could have helped out the other mutants and really shown that Rogue has a lot of abilities and powers outside of her mutancy. But no. She just spends this film waiting the entire time in line to get the cure, and then in the end, Bobby's like,
"This isn't what I wanted."
And then she's like,
I know. It's what I wanted.
and it's like, oh, okay. But they also filmed her doing the opposite.
I couldn't do it.
I mean, yeah, you can really tell how committed they were to the through line of this whole story, since it ends with Rogue getting the cure, but then also Rogue not getting the cure. Neither of these which has any bearing on the plot, so... There is a post-credit scene in this film. This is one of the first X-Men films to do a post-credit scene, and it teases the return of Xavier.
Hello, Moira.
Who just died.
Charles.
In this film. What is the point of killing him if the post-credit scene shows that he's just taken on a new body? It's really, really annoying. I hate when superhero movies pull that trigger of killing a character and then bring them back pretty much immediately. Nobody ever dies in superhero films, so of course it stands to reason that Xavier wouldn't be dead even by the end of Last Stand. X-Men The Last Stand was released in 2006, where it received a 57% on Rotten Tomatoes with a 61% audience score. The critic consensus states, X-Men The Last Stand provides plenty of mutant action for fans of the franchise, even if it does so at the expense of its predecessor's deeper character moments. Oof. X-Men Origins Wolverine. This is the first true absolute shite film in the series. I know X-Men 3 is bad. I honestly think there's parts of it that are still salvageable. There's parts that kind of work, and there's elements that I do like. There is nothing I like in this film. This film had trouble from the get-go. Before the film was even released, there was an unfinished work print version that was distributed, which showed some very early CG, including Logan doing the claws thing, and the reaction was really poor. People did not like what they were seeing. Unfortunately, none of this would actually get improved with the theatrical cut. The final version has just as crap CG and just as boring and incoherent a storyline. This film is cheese. This is cheesy right from the get-go. There's so many shots of Logan looking up to the heavens and screaming. Even just this opening sequence of them fighting together in all the wars is edited together in such a strange, cheesy way. It's so not X-Men. This film is really off color.
Wake me when it's over.
Yeah, my thoughts exactly. Is that Will.i.am?
Be nice. Or be your approximation of nice. Would you like a bucket?
Or as we call him in Canada, Will Je suis. This film actually introduces Ryan Reynolds as Wade Wilson, who would go on to eventually play the titular character in Deadpool. More on that later. I think Deadpool's humor here maybe caught the audiences a little off guard. Maybe the whole self-referential thing wasn't as welcome at the time as it is now.
Okay. People are dead.
There's something also just really comical about Wolverine being called Jimmy in this one, and everyone just always yelling Jimmy at him. After however many films of people yelling Wolverine, now everyone is just like, Jimmy, Jimmy, Jimmy. This is the only film where Logan canonically states that he's Canadian.
Your country needs you. I'm Canadian.
You know, Wolverine is definitely our #1 export. Number 2 is Nanaimo bars. So in this version, they predispose the idea that he volunteered to get the adamantium in his body to fight his brother, who is uncontrollable. Logan busts out of there and then claws an X through the door because this film is nothing if not heavy-handed. This film has all the cheesy-ass hallmarks of the worst action movies you've ever seen, including the ultimate cool guys don't look at explosions as they walk away from them. X-Men Origins Wolverine was released in 2009, where it received a 37% on Rotten Tomatoes with a 58% audience score. The critic consensus states, though Hugh Jackman gives his all, he can't help X-Men Origins Wolverine overcome a cliched-ridden script and familiar narrative. Yeah. X-Men First Class. So after the basic garbage fire that was X-Men Origins Wolverine, they ended up canceling some plans that they had, because originally it was going to be a whole series like X-Men Origins Wolverine and X-Men Origins Magneto. However, after the poor reception to Origins Wolverine, they decided to go in a different direction. So they made a true style prequel that just recasts everybody and shows the backstory of how the X-Men were created. In this version, Michael Fassbender plays Magneto, James McAvoy plays Xavier, Jennifer Lawrence plays Mystique. This film lends really interesting backstories to our characters, particularly Magneto. Magneto is on a hunt for the man who killed his mother and the man who turned him into the monster that he is. It lends a lot of credence to Magneto's behavior, showing how he was tortured from a young age and taught to channel his powers explicitly through anger and rage. I do think that parts of this film are miscast. I do like Jennifer Lawrence. I think she is really good in some things. I just don't really feel like she fits in as Mystique here. I don't know, it doesn't fully work. It's not the best.
Mutant and proud.
We also have January Jones, who plays the icy mind-reading lady. She's so forgettable, I don't even remember her name, and I just watched this film, so it's no surprise that they never brought her back. Hugh Jackman has a 10-second cameo in this.
Excuse me, I'm Eric Lensher.
Tales Xavier.
Go f yourself.
This actually does get referenced later on in Days of Future Past.
We came to you a long time ago seeking your help. And I'm going to say to you what you said to us then. Fuck off.
One thing that I have low tolerance for with prequels is how they have to give an explicit backstory to everything. Charles Xavier can't just be called Professor X because he's a professor whose last name starts with X. Mystique has to actually brand him the nickname, while she also just points at everybody else and tells them what their superhero names are too.
No, Havoc. We have to call him Havoc. That's his name now. And we were thinking, you should be Professor X, and you should be Magneto.
It's just super prequel tropey nonsense, and I didn't need it. None of us needed it. Their names are their names because those are their names. This film does have some really genuine moments. I think perhaps the sweetest and most sentimental is when, in the training montage, Xavier is trying to teach Eric to use his powers with positive thoughts rather than negative ones. So Charles uses his power to access a memory that Magneto didn't know he has. It's really well done. It's very sweet and very sensitive. It's a very sincere moment for this film, and honestly, I appreciate it because it's not really full of many. Kevin Bacon is a good villain in this, and that's saying something because there is a serious mixed legacy of the villains in this franchise too, especially with the fact that Magneto turns out to be the villain in so many of them. This film uses the Cuban Missile Crisis as a sort of framing device, with the third act culminating in the two countries going to war. I think it's a pretty interesting angle to work the story from, and it works pretty good. This film is, it's okay. It's okay. It's good. It's all right. It's good. X-Men First Class was released in 2011, where it received an 86% Rotten Tomato score. Hey, that's higher than X2. That is just wrong. Anyways, it received an 86% Rotten Tomatoes score and an 87% audience score, making it one of the highest rated films in the franchise. The critic consensus states, with a strong script, stylish direction, and powerful performances from its well-rounded cast, X-Men First Class is a welcome return to form for the franchise. Wolverine. This film I didn't really think too much of the first time that I watched it. I watched it sometime right after it came out, and I just kind of instantly forgot about it. But looking back on it now, in rewatching it, I actually do feel a little bit more kindly about it. I mean, it's the second best out of all three of the Logan films, so, you know. I do look more kindly upon it now, but really more so in the first act. I feel like there's a lot of interesting setup, and there's some really unique and stark images, like when Logan has to put out the bear that the hunter failed to kill. That was really effective. Unfortunately for me, it never really got any better than that moment, and that's about like 15 minutes in. It's a bit messy. The whole thing takes place in Japan. Wolverine is brought to Japan by request of an old friend who he helped shield from a bomb back in Japan. So the guy forces him to come back, and then he comes back and the guy's like, I can take away your power because the old man is dying, and he wants Logan's power. So really the central conflict here is Logan is being asked / voluntold to give up his powers, which, you know, they're trying to suggest the idea that maybe he wants because he's just tired of living and he wants to die. The whole time he's also haunted by these kind of hallucinations of Jean Grey, and I don't know, it's one of the only things that really grounds it with the rest of the series. It just gets into a really pulpy CGI robot warrior state with the third act, and it just really doesn't work. I did feel this film was pretty forgettable the first time I saw it. I definitely will remember it better from now on after having seen it a second time, but will I ever watch it again? No, I honestly don't see any reason to. This film is also guilty of having some of the most, comic booky writing, especially from whoever the hell this woman is.
Where is Logan? I'm not done with him.
You work for Yoshida. I get it. Yet you cannot fulfill his dying wish.
You know, acting is subjective, but objectively, this woman is really bad in this film. This film ends with Wolverine fighting a giant adamantium samurai with the old man inside it, and it's just so ridiculous and honestly really off mark for the tone of the rest of the film too. It's such a weird, gimmicky, comic booky ending in a very dissatisfying way. There's also a pretty forced romance here that just doesn't sit well when juxtaposed with all the Jean Grey dream scenes. Yeah, I feel like they really should have picked one or the other. You know, new romance or old romance. I feel like trying to hit both on the head at the same time, it's just like another fault of this film. This film really does make some honest efforts, but it is just kind of middling and forgetful. The Wolverine was released in 2013, where it received a 71% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 69% audience score. The critic consensus states, although its final act succumbs to the usual cartoonish antics, The Wolverine is one superhero movie that manages to stay true to the comics while keeping casual viewers entertained. I guess. Maybe the most interesting thing about this film, though, is the post-credit scene, because the post-credit scene, which shows Logan going through an airport, also features the return of the original Magneto and the original Professor X. Now, I mean, I guess because of that post-credit scene from X-Men 3, we're just supposed to, like, understand that he's in his own body now. Like, in that post-credit scene, he was in somebody's body, but now he's back in his own body. And when Logan asks him how, he just says,
"As I told you a long time ago, you're not the only one with gifts."
Okay. And then he says, you need to come with us because there's something that's threatening, yada, yada, yada. It's a tease for Days of Future Past. X-Men, Days of Future Past. You know, right from the get-go, you can tell this film's going to be good because they incorporate the X-Men theme into the 20th Century Fox opening. Days of Future Past is honestly so great in how it just feels so necessary for this franchise. For people that were getting tired of getting lost in all the prequel characters, for people that wanted all the old characters back with the original actors. What I really like about this film is this is by far the most genre-heavy, science fiction-y of all the X-Men films, and they do it really, really, really well. The way that the desolate future is animated and shot looks spectacular. It's giving me Terminator vibes, but done much better than a lot of the recent Terminator films. This film also opens with a classic Xavier monologue.
The future. A dark, desolate world.
I've missed the sound of that voice. So in this film, in the far distant future, these Sentinels, which having used Mystique's DNA, can now transform into any kind of mutant's powers to kill any mutants. So all of the mutants as well as humans are being picked off and there's almost nobody left. So what they do is they send Logan back in time to stop Mystique's murder attempt on Trask. Trask is the guy who invents the Sentinels, so they have to stop her assassination attempt so that they never get her DNA, so that they can never make the Sentinels. They send Logan back in time to the 70s into his younger self, where he wakes up and we are immediately treated to butts and bone claws. This film joins together the cast of the first 3 X-Men films as well as First Class in an effort to join both as well as reset the timeline and negate the canon of some of the lesser X-Men films like X-Men 3. This film also has some really, really great character arcs, and arguably one of the best for Charles Xavier's. There's a role reversal here where now Charles has to be led by Wolverine, whereas in the very first X-Men film, Wolverine was being led by Charles. In the 70s, Charles doesn't have his powers and he doesn't run the school, so it's Wolverine's job to go there, convince them of this whole future, and then get him and Magneto to help. I love seeing the interaction of these characters and Logan trying to explain everything from the future.
You and I are gonna be good friends. You just don't know it yet.
Of course, Charles doesn't want to believe it, and Magneto immediately accepts it because he always predicted this kind of dark future. So again, for the final time, Rogue is shafted here. She gets so shafted that they even released an extended cut of this film, aptly called The Rogue Cut. In the far distant future, they filmed scenes with Anna Paquin as Rogue, and, you guessed it, they deleted them. They deleted all the scenes of her in the future. They initially reported that she had been deleted from the entire film, but spoiler alert, she does actually appear briefly at the end. However, in the extended Rogue Cut, which I personally highly recommend, we actually get to see this whole subplot of them going to find Rogue, who is being experimented on in the old Cerebro. At least they put her in the extended edition of this one. That's something. X-Men Days of Future Past was released in 2014, where it received a staggering 90% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 91% audience score. Way to go. The critic consensus states, X-Men Days of Future Past combines the best elements of the series to produce a satisfyingly fast-paced outing that ranks among the franchise's finest installments. Deadpool. This is the little film that could. This is the film that they never thought they were going to get made, and then when they did, oh boy, did it deliver. Ever since X-Men Origins Wolverine, Ryan Reynolds was attached to the character Deadpool and always wanted to do a Deadpool movie. They even went so far as making a CGI mock-up of one of the first scenes from the draft they had of Deadpool. And apparently they showed it to 20th Century Fox, and 20th Century Fox passed. They didn't like it, and or they didn't think it could work, and that was that. The end. No, of course it's not the end. What happened was this video got leaked during Comic-Con, and people went wild. People weren't 100% sure if it was real. People were pretty sure that was Ryan Reynolds' voice in it. That video getting leaked is the best thing that ever could have happened because the fan reception was so wild and so kinetic that 20th Century Fox was like, oh my God, we need to do this. And the result is everything you'd want from a Deadpool movie.
Oh, hello. I know, right? Whose balls did I have to fondle to get my very own movie? I can't tell you, but it does rhyme with Wolverine.
It's filthy, it's salacious, it's self-referential, it's funny, it's weird, it's gory, and yeah, it is R-rated.
You're probably thinking, my boyfriend said this was a superhero movie, but that guy in a red suit just turned that other guy into a kebab.
And actually, if you've seen my video about the Matrix franchise, then you already know that this film beat out Matrix Reloaded to become, at the time, the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time, until Deadpool 2 beat it out. This film seems to have incidentally started the trend of using the song Angel of the Morning in weird and inappropriate ways. This film is full of fourth wall breaking jokes and takes jabs at the confusing nature of the X-Men timeline.
Let us go talk to the professor.
McAvoy or Stewart? These timelines are so confusing.
Ryan Reynolds is, of course, super on point. He's funny, he's charming, and he looks good in the suit. I also just want to say, I think the suit is beautifully made. I actually think it's one of my favorite Marvel suits. It is essentially a love story, but done in its own weird, unique, sometimes gross way. Deadpool was released in 2016, where it received an 85% on Rotten Tomatoes with a 90% audience score. The critic consensus states, fast, funny, and gleefully profane, the fourth wall busting Deadpool subverts superhero film formula with wildly entertaining and decidedly non-family friendly results. X-Men Apocalypse. This is one of the worst superhero movies I've ever seen. I have such a low tolerance for this film. I'll say I really like the opening. I think the opening is good. All that stuff in Egypt I think actually was kind of interesting. It kind of had me going. It was interesting. It looked good. I don't know, as soon as we get to the bit where they're just like falling eternally or whatever, it just kind of like immediately took me out of it, and then it never got me back. There is so much wrong with this film. First of all of our returning characters are way too young looking in the 80s, considering that they were in like the 50s and 60s in the previous ones. They look way, way, way too young. They did this weird thing where they made every new prequel set in a new decade, but you know, they worked with these actors across a span of like 6 or 7 years. So like a lot of them really haven't aged. It's too silly to believe that all these people are in their like 50s, 60s, 70s. Why does this film flash not only a swastika, but also the Twin Towers in its opening credits? I honestly don't really care for a lot of the younger, rebooted actors in this one. I'm glad that they were able to find another actor who was willing to do all of the Nightcrawler makeup, because Alan Cumming refused to return for X-Men 3 or any of the other X-Men films because he just refused to sit through the makeup. Mystique is now seen as a savior and a public figure, even though she actively tries to deny that role that people are putting upon her. What does that remind me of? I also find it really annoying that they try to give a canon reason for why Xavier is bald. This is just like another one of those annoying, if it's a prequel, there needs to be like a detailed backstory for everything, including why this guy doesn't have hair. There's so many reasons to watch this movie. Find out how Xavier is bald. Find out why Storm's hair is white. I just don't know why bad movies, especially ones that are like the 9th or 10th entry in a franchise, think that they're being all cute and clever by being self-referential about how bad they know it is.
Well, at least we can all agree the third one's always the worst.
It doesn't make this film feel better that this is the third entry in this prequel franchise, and it's the worst, and these people are coming out of a theater and talking about how the third film is always the worst. It really feels like the filmmakers are making fun of us for paying patronage to them.
It's the most complex, the most sophisticated. Wasn't afraid to have a dark ending.
Yeah, but come on, if it wasn't for the first one, you wouldn't have any of the rest of the movies.
Well, at least we can all agree the third one's always the worst.
This film is also just jam-packed with glowy stuff. Purple glowy stuff and blue glowy stuff. All the very blurry, smoky, power laser beamy, sword glowy, neon-y things that you can imagine. Things that just make this film look dirt-ass cheap. We see Logan with a young Jean Grey. It's really creepy. It really just makes their romance vividly unsexy when you actually see that age difference. This is a bad Wolverine cameo. In terms of Magneto crimes across the franchise, this shit takes the cake. Yikes. It doesn't even make sense. This guy basically just destroys just like half the world. He just like takes all the metal out of the world everywhere and just vanishes entire cities. And then in the end, he's like, I don't know, sorry or whatever. So like, I guess they all let it slide. You as an audience member canonically know that Magneto has committed so many ridiculous hijinks that it almost feels like the characters at this point, even though this one is a prequel, are just like, oh, Magneto, you're just always gonna be this way, aren't you? You're just always gonna do your little hijinks. But we know that like deep down or whatever, you're like, you know, a good person, and like, we feel bad for you because you got a wife and a daughter who died 30 seconds after being introduced. So like, he's got a soul, guys. Who hasn't been there? Who hasn't destroyed cities after cities? You know, people grieve in their own way, guys. Peter just casually mentions that Magneto is his dad. It's a bad follow-up to what was originally just a cute joke in Days of Future Past.
They told me you control metal. You know, my mom once knew a guy who could do that.
Now it's sad canon and I hate it. And the whole thing where Peter tries to like talk to him as his son is just cringy. Then it ends with everybody hates mutants again now. So like, this film is so annoying because it basically just makes like a closed loop out of the franchise, and it just sort of resets everything to where it began. It bothers me that they even try to hint at the idea of like a followable timeline across each of these. Honestly, by this point, as far as I'm concerned, each one of these is its own freaking universe. It's just a hot mess, and there's a million things that I could say, but honestly, I just don't want to have this part make up the bulk of my video. I gotta move on, or I'm just gonna hyperfixate forever. X-Men Apocalypse was released in 2016, where it received a 47% on Rotten Tomatoes with a 65% audience score. The critic consensus states, overloaded action and a cliched villain take the focus away from otherwise strong performers, with some exceptions, and resonant themes, making X-Men Apocalypse a middling chapter of the venerable superhero franchise.
I am still right here. And you could have it all. I would find a way.
Logan, you still have time.
Right from that first trailer, we knew this was going to be something different, and boy is it. It's faithful to the comics. It brings back the actors you love in a very significant way. It's heartfelt, it's honest, it's brutal, it's R-rated, and it concludes Patrick Stewart and Hugh Jackman's portrayals in the entire X-Men series. It's also just really refreshing to actually get to hear these characters swear, like getting to hear Xavier say,
"F off, Logan."
Just brings warmth into my heart. In this film, we go into a far, far distant future where Logan is an old man just trying to take care of Professor X, who is having aneurysms that cause his powers to erupt and hurt other people. It's initially alluded to that Logan killed the X-Men.
What did you do? What did you do? Answer me!
Which would make sense because in the Old Man Logan comic book storyline he did, but we later find out it was actually from a psychic aneurysm on Xavier's part. So Logan's mission here is to try and buy a boat that he can keep himself and Xavier away from the rest of humanity. It's a very grounded, subdued, and poignant entry in the series, and honestly a true standout. In this future world, the mutant gene has been sussed out and removed, so nobody has mutancy anymore, until we find out there is some underground testing where they're creating mutants from the DNA of mutants that have been experimented on, including Logan. So Logan finds out that he does in fact have, from his own DNA, a daughter. Now, it's a storyline we've seen before, the surrogate-child relationship in a genre movie. I think we've best seen it with Ripley and Newt in Aliens. This is arguably one of the best versions of it. It's done with just the right amount of sensitivity. It comes in just at the right time, and it ends on such a powerful note. This film is also refreshingly lighter on VFX. It reminds me of the more stripped back nature out of necessity that we see in, like, let's say the first X-Men film. Logan is also a great stopping point for the franchise. I really wish they'd stopped here. Logan was released in 2017, where it received a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, making it to date the highest critically scored X-Men film in the entire 13-film franchise. The critic consensus states, Hugh Jackman makes the most of his final outing as Wolverine with a gritty, nuanced performance in a violent but surprisingly thoughtful superhero action film that defies genre conventions. Deadpool 2. In classic Deadpool fashion, they started making this film without a finished script and with some shakeup over direction for Deadpool. So with this one, Ryan Reynolds was actually writing for himself too. So they were writing as they go. And even though I do think it shows a little bit, I will say I actually think this film is still pretty strong. It stays very true to the first film. It's still got that super fresh wit. It's still got its own specific tone of fun and gross humor. I will say I think the self-referential quipping is a little excessive in this one, and moments like this scene of Deadpool dying but not dying just go on and on and on.
Ugh. Can you see it? Do you see that beautiful bright light? There it is. Oh, that's the sun. Don't stare directly into that. Just have a few final words.
However, this actual tease of the X-Men cast is hilarious and unexpected, and that's the kind of stuff that I came here to see with Deadpool 2. If you are going to watch this film, I definitely recommend you watch the super duper version, which is the extended cut. I saw the original theatrical version and I thought it was decent. But in rewatching the extended cut, I actually like it even better. Some of the best sequences got cut, including the extended Yakuza scene. This Celine Dion song opening with the Bond-esque visuals is inspired. I don't know why I didn't think more of it the first time that I saw it, but this opening is one of the smartest things about this film, and I just think it's hilarious and awesome that they got Celine Dion, and they also did this whole music video with her. It's really funny. The whole time travel plot to save a child who will go on to do bad things is a little familiar. To be honest, I think that Looper definitely did it better. You know, Deadpool is a lot of things, but it's not like a big science fiction genre heavy film like Days of Future Past. Yet this even makes some visual aesthetic reference to Days of Future Past, which I don't know completely works in this film. It's part of the complicated thing about Deadpool, is you kind of have to walk that line of how much into the X-Men series do you include it, and how much do you let it be compartmentalized. I think the first film balanced that well, and the second one a little bit less, but it's still a really fun, messed up ride. Deadpool 2 was released in 2018, where it received an 84% on Rotten Tomatoes and an 85% Rotten Tomatoes score. Critic consensus states, though it threatens to buckle under the weight of its meta gags, agreed. Deadpool 2 is a gory, gleeful lampoon of the superhero genre, buoyed by Ryan Reynolds' undeniable charm. X-Men Groundhog Day. X-Men Dark Phoenix. You know when you see a screenshot of something from social media, and then somebody screenshots that, and then somebody screenshots that, and then by the time you're looking at it, it's just like this blurry picture in picture in picture that has everybody's phone's watermarks on it, but you can't really tell what the original message is anymore? That's Dark Phoenix. This film is tired. This film is tired, baby. This film is tired, and so am I. Credit due where it's due. I think the first scene is pretty decently done. It's pretty much the end of where I think the credit is due. So in this film, we've got the new young cast back again. They're really not much better in this one. And they try to do the Dark Phoenix storyline again. And oh my God, how did they retread almost every single thing they did with the last Dark Phoenix storyline? This film is a straight up redo of all the Dark Phoenix stuff, and they didn't get any of it any better. This is where it really goes to show that when you've done it all, you've got nothing to do but put on a greatest hits record and just dance like a clown to that. There's nothing in here that we haven't seen before. There's nothing in here that doesn't just feel like old tricks. It's just so ridiculous because, you know, I guess when it's the 12th film, why not just have aliens? Why not just have mutant aliens now? They knew that was going to sound stupid because they even told Jessica Chastain not to say that she was an alien in it. But she's an alien. She's an alien. They land from outer space. They look just like any typical alien ever. They're aliens, but they're not aliens. Don't you dare say they are. They've altered Mystique's makeup for the millionth and final time. Mystique's makeup really just got crappier and crappier with every film, and it just hits a plateau of lazy in this. The truth is, Jennifer Lawrence didn't even want to return for this film. The director promised her that if she returned, she wouldn't have to do much Mystique makeup. She said herself that the reason why she didn't want to return to the franchise was she just couldn't put up with the makeup anymore. And girl, I sympathize, but at the same time, that really was the role. I mean, it's the 12th film, so who cares, I guess, right? I think they're just banking on you not noticing, but I noticed. This film also does Professor X really, really dirty. They make Professor X an egomaniac who is ultimately responsible for Dark Phoenix.
Please, tell me it's not your ego. Being on the cover of magazines, getting a medal from the president.
The problem is when you do this many films with this many characters, it gets harder and harder to give them continuing plot arcs. And that's a big problem with Dark Phoenix. It's like they've just hit a ceiling and there's nowhere to go. And they're also retreading on a previous plot. So it's just bad, boring, familiar territory. The writing is very so-so and often just mismatched and off-kilter.
The women are always saving the men around here. You might want to think about changing the name to X-Women.
This film is the Applebee's, the Moxie's Grill House, if you will, of X-Men films. It is a bad copy and paste of a dream that you had of like the worst X-Men film. This film is the ultimate proof that the franchise in its current version has absolutely overstayed its welcome. Time to go. Dark Phoenix was released in 2019, where it received a 22 on Rotten Tomatoes, bringing it to a series low. The critic consensus states, Dark Phoenix ends an era of the X-Men franchise by taking a second stab at adapting a classic comics arc, with deeply disappointing results. Ooh, that's very honest. New Mutants. This film is about defeating your metaphorical bears, as well as your literal ones. So New Mutants is the final film in 20th Century Fox's run of the X-Men series. And I gotta say, it is just such a piddling, flaccid, boring, forgettable, nothing film. This film got delayed for years. When 20th Century Fox saw the initial rough cut, they actually wanted to just throw out everything and start from the beginning. Instead, they went back and they reshot a lot of it. Initially, it was supposed to be more of a horror. I guess they went back and they reworked it to feel more fantasy. The result is neither. This film is also way more comical than it is scary. This film is about a bunch of young, hormonally crazy, new mutants living in some kind of a facility together where they're being taught to control their powers, and if they behave or whatever, they get to go on to the next stage of the facility, which it's alluded to is like the X-Men. They released a trailer in 2017, slated it for release in 2018, and then it got delayed all the way until it finally came out in 2020. This film is so strange and so small. It's literally 6 characters, it's 5 kids, and 1 worker at this facility, and there's just nobody else. We never see anybody else. We never see any other staff. This film feels like a play that was put on by the high school drama class that had access to 1 set. Just like Dark Phoenix, there's nothing that this film says or does that feels new or fresh. We do get a nice little queer love story, and that's cool, but too little too late because it's in such a bad film, and it's not even really done in a particularly interesting way. Also, so many characters have terrible accents in this.
Why do I have to?
Every time your shirt gets dirty, you just throw it away.
I knew it was bad.
They also just did the whole orphanage, new mutant young thing. And honestly, I liked it better in Deadpool 2. This film feels like a very long student short film, and not to be rude, but I can see why when they watched the rough cut, they might not have felt very good about it, because it is absolutely just one of the worst films in this franchise. The writing is so stale. This dialogue just sludges along.
What's it stand for?
I'm sorry, I don't want to talk about it.
There's a lot of good actors just trapped in bad script hell here. There's just nowhere for them to go. Also, how is the girl who uses a talking puppet the bully in this film? New Mutants was not screened for critics before its release, which is usually something studios do when they know it's going to be bad. The New Mutants was released in 2020, where it received a 35% on Rotten Tomatoes with a 56% audience score. The critics' consensus states, rendering a list of potentially explosive ingredients mostly inert, The New Mutants is a franchise spin-off that's less than the sum of its superpowered parts. So that's it. That's all 13 X-Men films. That is 25.8 hours in total I spent watching and rewatching all of these films. I had never finished X-Men Origins Wolverine before, I had never finished Dark Phoenix, and I had never seen New Mutants. And honestly, I stand by me not having completed them before. At this point, I wish I hadn't watched them. Arguably the best in the series is X2 and Days of Future Past, and arguably the worst is X-Men Origins Wolverine and X-Men Apocalypse. Most forgettable entry in the franchise? X-Men Origins Wolverine. Watching the whole series in context is really, really interesting. When you see it in that macro perspective, you really see how much the good ones stand out, and you really see how much the poor ones just fade away The overall legacy that we get with these 13 X-Men films is, yes, mixed, but I think a lot of us will remember some of the best X-Men films. And you know, I don't think their reputation will necessarily be tarnished by some of the worst ones. So what's in store for the future of the franchise? On March 20th, 2019, 20th Century Fox was acquired by the Walt Disney Company. So now, Disney not only owns the MCU, which includes films like Iron Man and the Avengers and so on and so forth, but now they own all of the X-Men and the Deadpool films. Kevin Feige said in a recent interview that the incorporation of the X-Men into the MCU would be a long time away from now, and that whatever phase he's working on now does not currently involve any iteration of the X-Men. However, he did say that Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool would get incorporated into the MCU. I find this very cool, very surprising. I don't think they're going to do it anytime soon, but I feel like whenever they do, it's going to be a surprise. So what's the lesson here? What can we learn from a 13 series franchise that just seemed to be on a path of never ending until it got the final boot from Disney? Well, it's like I say, the third film in every franchise is always a risk, and in this one, X3 really is just surprising in how bad it is, and it's arguably where the series started to go off the rail, and then it only got worse with X-Men Origins Wolverine. This series though is really interesting though, because not only did it pull itself back with First Class, but then it gave us some of its best entries ever, like Days of Future Past and Logan. But then it also gave us some of its worst entries, like Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix. This series is just absolutely all over the place, so honestly, the lesson is maybe make something cohesive, and maybe just don't make so many of them in such a short amount of time. They have nonstop been making these movies for over 20 years, and I, for one, am really looking forward to a little bit of rest. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope it was interesting. I hope I did a good job of going over the entire history of this super mixed franchise. This was absolutely, without a doubt, my most ambitious video yet. So thank you so much for your patronage. Thank you for hanging in there. And now here's the part where I have to beg for some interaction, because it really does help. How many X-Men films have you seen? Have you seen all 13 X-Men films? Have you? How many have you seen? How many have you missed? Which one was your favorite? Which one was your least favorite? I've told you mine. Now I need you to tell me yours. I really want to know. What's your favorite X-Men film? And which one do you think is just the absolute worst? What a way to spend nearly 30 hours, but it was so worth it. Until next time, I hope you all have a good week. I hope you get some rest. I hope you have some fun. I know I will be, and I will see you all very soon. Bye. You love binge watching movies and TV shows. Who doesn't? You're a lazy bitch, so what?